Good evening, Beachcombers. How are you? What's going on? Welcome to this month's Typhoon. Tonight is Typhoon Becky, all about jewelry, and I am super excited because jewelry's everywhere. That's one thing, and then Becky's pictures are incredible. So I look forward to hearing the secrets. What's happening, Becky? How are you?
Hi there. Not much, here in cold, rainy, snowy, whatever it decides someone wants to do, Ohio,
Yeah.
I'm
So
sure.
what's the weather like today?
Today it started off around 35 to 40, but I noticed around 2 or 3 o'clock it was snowing and now it's kind of sleeting. So, it's
Oh,
perfect weather.
we only got to 67 today, so
Tough, 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 tough. But I did run outside yesterday, so it was warm enough to do that. So
you are a machine.
I'm trying. I'm trying.
And just to let everyone know, Becky has a bird that could be talkative. So if you all suddenly hear a little squawk or something, it's not in your house. It's just coming through your speakers.
It is. It's a little Quaker. His name is Ziggy. My eBay store is called Ziggy's Vault, and he is the inspiration for the name. So
awesome. All right. So I'm going to take myself out of this and then just put you up, and we are off and running.
okay, everybody. Well, tonight I titled this Intro to Costume Jewelry. And my goal tonight is to eliminate some of the fear that some of you have in listing and trying to find the keywords about costume jewelry. And if you want to flip to the next screen there, Jason. Basically, what I want to do tonight is give you an introduction of like what the three main categories of jewelry are, and then go into some of my tools of trade, items that I use every single day when I'm listing and when I'm searching and testing my jewelry and cleaning and stuff like that. Then we'll go through some basic jewelry terminology. And this is important for when you want to list items so you could kind of grasp some of the keywords that you want to put into your listing titles. And then moving onward, we're going to go into the 5 eras of jewelry from Victorian to modern and fashion. And this is important that I'm going to give you examples of pieces of jewelry in all the different areas, all these different eras. So when you have a piece and it's sitting in front of you, you'll know at least another keyword or, where to go, where to look, and how to list it. Because eBay does have different categories for different, for the different types of jewelry in the era. And then finally, if we have a few minutes at the end, I'll do some just top 10 random jewelry tips. So with that, let's start. As I mentioned, there are 3 main jewelry categories. The first one would be like fine precious metal, gold and silver and platinum pieces of jewelry. The next grouping I would say is scrap things, and it could be both fine as well as costume. Nothing is wasted in this particular category, so scrap is valuable. And then third is costume jewelry, which would be antique, vintage, and modern. And it is the third category tonight is what I'm going to focus on. I will mention, though, that fine, precious, and metal jewelry is generally valued a whole lot by weight. That's why I have the picture of a little scale there and a piece of silver jewelry onto it. Scrap also is valued by weight, both fine jewelry as well as costume. And when I have a bunch of broken costume jewelry, I generally sell it for $3 or $4 a pound. So that's my value for costume. But we are going to focus, as I said tonight, on costume jewelry. And just to start off, we're going to set some parameters here. I consider, and a lot of people consider, antique jewelry to be items that are 100 years old or older. Vintage to be like from 1920 to 1999, and then modern, anything from the year 2000 to the present. So with those parameters, let's go to the next screen here.
So I know this may be a stupid question. Are those your parameters, or are those kind of like the generally accepted parameters?
I would think that's kind of a generally accepted parameters, but
Okay.
I guess some people could say antique could be anything over 50 years old or 75 years old,
Okay.
But
Coolio. Bye.
That's what I use. So then my first section here is, I figure, when everybody comes up to me that, oh, I have a whole shoebox full of jewelry and I just don't know where to start or whatever. I look at it, I don't know what to do. And so it just sits there. So I thought I was going to take 5-10 minutes here of the beginning here and go over a little bit of my tools, my photography, and how I store my jewelry. So with that, we'll go to the first screen here. Lots of times when I dig in jewelry mounds to find costume jewelry, it's not all that glamorous. It's literally 8-foot tables piled 6 inches deep of jewelry, and it's all tangled up, and I'm plucking it out, and it's been in somebody's garage or basement or attic for, forever. So, I get it and it's filthy. So my first important tools of the trade is my cleaning supplies. And so that is what's on the left-hand side there. I don't use any fancy cleaning supplies at all. 99% of my jewelry is cleaned in a solution of water, Windex, and a couple squirts of Dawn dishwashing solution. I guess you could use any type of window cleaner, any type of, soap and a toothbrush, and I just go at it and I clean it and damp it dry. In the tub there, I have Wright Silver Cream. I know we're not talking about sterling here, but there's a lot of silver-plated costume jewelry. And again, with Q-tips or with a toothbrush, I dig into that cream and I clean it. And then finally, in the front there is this GS Hypo Cement. This is a very good brand of jewelry glue. It dries clear. It squirts out in like a little pin needle, and so you could put a tiny little drop, and I use it all the time for, loose stones or pieces when I'm cleaning if a stone falls out. I generally don't, repairing jewelry is a whole different animal, but sometimes if you clean things, the water gets behind it, and then, the stone is loose, and so you got to tighten it back up. On the right-hand side, these are all the items that I use, and I really think, anybody that really wants to do a decent job listing in jewelry needs to have. From the very top is a ring sizer. If you have a ring, you need to slide it on there, know where the heck it is. A gram scale, even though we're not doing silver or gold, lots of times people want to know how heavy the piece is. And I do everything in grams, not in ounces. That's my preference. Some people do list it in ounces. Probably my most important thing, and I'm always having it even around my neck, it's a loop. And I don't even have just one. I have a whole bunch, people, because I'm losing them all the time. And if you notice, it's like the loop is, it closes. I have to put it on a necklace and put it around my neck. Otherwise, I lose it. So that, I would say my loop is my most important, as well as my cheater glasses that I would have. And then I have there a tape measure, a flexible one, because you got to measure things, and tweezers. I always got to pick things out and do whatever. So move on to the next screen. I wanted to give everybody a pointer on how I set up and I do all my pictures. So this is my light box, and I have 2 photography lights. I actually bought my system from a company called Alzo. I'm sure there's many other photography suppliers out there with the bulbs. But this is, how I set it up. One light coming down on the top, one shooting off from the side. And then on the other side of the screen here, this is a Presidium gem tester. This is a luxury. It costs money. It's like $250, $300. But if you're really serious about selling jewelry, it's, in my opinion, it's a must-have. It takes the guesswork out of knowing gemstones. All I have to do is, with that little wand there, if I have a piece of jewelry and I think it's a garnet, say, I touch that little gold wand tip to the garnet, and then the little meter will buzz on over, and like in that little red area or whatever, and it'll land right where what the gem is. So it'll take, it's a scientific way for me to, know and with certainty when I'm listing items that it is a garnet versus just a hunk of red glass or whatever. The little one that's next to it, just going right back, that's a portable one. So it's the same machine, but it's something that I could throw in my purse. And that one, believe it or not, is more expensive than the desktop one. Okay, next screen.
What's that run, the portable one?
The portable one is probably closer to $300.
Okay.
And the other one's like maybe $259, something like that.
Cool.
Mm-hmm. This is my collection of body parts, or some of them. You know, if you're going to do jewelry, you need a bunch of forms, and you don't. One is nice, two is great. You know, I have a whole variety. When you take a look at some of my listings, I try not to have all my listings vanilla and cookie cutter. I try to make it interesting for my my customers, because I have like 3,100 items up there in my eBay store right now. And I don't want them to get like mesmerized, like, oh, everything looks the same and everything blurs together. So, you know, I have a variety of different items. And I want to say, if you're starting out, stay away from black. Black is probably the hardest prop to try to take pictures on for jewelry, because it's when you do the magnification, those little bits of lint really glitter and doesn't make it look very attractive. Onward. So this is really important. A lot of people tell me, I just can't get a good clear picture when I'm taking close-up shots of the jewelry. It gets blurry, or, you know, this and that. The key is you have to set your camera to macro to get best jewelry results. If your camera, you know, the little picture there that I have that looks like a tulip, that is like the universal picture, I guess, in the photography world, you know, symbol for the macro mode. I switched over to an Olympus camera not too long ago, and we have a microscope. So anything that'll give good close-up shots, but I have yet to be able to take a good close-up shot with my Apple phone. And I have an Apple phone, but I use a standalone one.
What iPhone do you have?
I have the 8.
Okay. Yeah, I got the 11 Max, so I haven't tried, but I will try it and report back how it looks.
Yeah, a lot of it too is an angle of how close you have to get to take the picture. Lots of times when I'm taking really close-up shots of like little marks inside of rings and stuff like that, I'm literally like a half an inch away, and I have to get the right angle in there. So, but yeah, I'd be interested to know how it works. This is an example of how I store my items once they're listed. You know, it's funny, back in high school or back in junior high, I was a librarian aide or whatever. Who would have known I'd be sorting my jewelry in a library card catalog? This piece that I picked up here has 72 drawers, and I house over 2,000 of my pieces in there. And in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see how each of the drawers are organized. I've purchased monthly index cards that have numbers 1 through 31 on them for 31 days in the month. And that's what I feed into each of those cards. And I label each of my drawers A to Z and then AA to ZZ. So I have like A1, A2, A3. And in the, when we're listing on eBay and stuff like that, we have the custom label, the SKU box or whatever. That's where I indicate where, you know, my inventory, where the piece is. I used to have a lot, and the other ones on the right-hand side on the top, those are where I put some of my larger pieces, like necklaces and items in boxes that won't fit in the card catalog. I used to house all of my jewelry in there for inventory, but the problem was they got too deep, and when I was shuffling around after I sold them and digging through them, some of the pieces got messed up or damaged or scratched and things like that. So that's why I went to the card catalog. And I tell you, it was painstaking to get it all in there, but it was the best thing that I've ever done.
It's so cool too.
So it's up on legs or whatever. Yeah.
I was telling Becky, I said, for whatever weird reason, I've always wanted a card catalog.
So there it is. Yeah. Like, yeah. They're not cheap, and they're not easy to find. But this one I found over, in somebody's garage over in Beechwood, Ohio. And it was like $600, and I got them down to $500. And I talked my husband into carting it home for me or whatever.
Nice.
So it works nice. Yeah. So onward here. So now we're on to our second topic, basic jewelry terminology. So when we have a piece of jewelry in front of us, we want to know how to describe it. This is rolled gold. That's the first one that I'm going to go. Rolled gold is generally utilized and described when you are describing Victorian pieces, and that would be like from the late 1800s to like 1920. It's generally rose gold or pink gold in color or yellow gold in appearance. Rolled gold usually doesn't have any markings on it. It is what it is. And the definition of it is gold in the form of a thin coating applied to a metal base. So really, if you think of a super thin sheet of, say, 10 karat or 9 karat. 9 karat was very common to use in rolled gold. And it's exactly what it seems like. They would, the jewelers would hammer this and they'd have a base, maybe of brass or something, and they would literally wrap this 9 karat around it and fuse it somehow to this piece and then mold it into really cool types of designs. Like you see here, this is, I believe, I think this was I don't know if that was a lion or if that was a wolf or something like that, but that was a pretty cool one. And rolled gold, when you do use it, you want to weigh it because there's a lot of gold in that piece. So there's value in the material itself on that. And then we're going to move on to the next one, which is gold filled. Gold filled was generally used in Art Deco to present. And gold filled, as in contrary to rolled gold, it could be yellow in color, it could be pink or rose, or it could be silver in appearance. The nice thing about gold filled is that it's a legal thing. And the definition in the United States is that 1/20th or 5% pure gold layer, and then it's pressure bonded over the base metal. And they have to have that stamp that you're looking at right there. So you're seeing this here. The stamp reads 1/20th 12 karat of gold filled. And it could say 1/20th 10 karat gold filled. It could say 1/20th 14 karat gold filled. And then the WRE is just whoever made that particular piece. But the difference in this is that the process to apply it to the piece of jewelry is the same, but the gold content is much less than the rolled gold. And then the final, another one, that the next slide, Jason, we want to go to where a whole bunch of jewelry and this is where you find the majority of your pieces. It's in the gold, silver, or rhodium plated, or HGE. And in case you're wondering, HGE stands for heavy gold electroplate. This is, it seemed like, like plated jewelry is something more recent, but it's actually been predominant from the 1920s to the present. And it's usually, though, just in yellow or silver in appearance, although there's a few manufacturers like Mylor these days that are going into pink bronze. So they're doing it that way. But the difference between all this is, whereas the rolled gold and the gold filled was actually a layer that was fused on to a piece of base metal, this is a method. They apply the gold by some sort of a chemical or electrochemical process by depositing, the layer of the metal onto the base metal. Literally, they dip a piece into some sort of a vat, and then they shoot electrocurrents through the
Uh-oh, we don't hear you. Yeah, your thing says you're muted for somehow, Beck.
Okay, I hit it.
All right.
All right, sorry. Okay, is rolled gold the same as plated? No, it is not. Rolled gold is, as I said, an actual coating of, an actual thin sheet of sheer 14 karat, 9 karat, 10 karat, whatever, cemented, glued, adhered to a base metal. It is much higher gold content than plated, so it is totally different. And as I said, the rolled gold was manually put on it. The plated is electronically put onto it. Here's some more terminology. Prong set rhinestones. As you could see, if you look at the close of the picture, you actually see the glass stones, and they have like little metal clamps around it. When we say prong set, that's what we're talking about, the little metal clamps that are going around it. Next to it is glued-in rhinestones. Sounds obvious, but if you have a piece that does not have a prong set, you could describe it as glued in, the rhinestones. That generally prong set stones are better quality pieces than glued-in stones. Not always, though. There's always exceptions. Molded glass. If you have a piece that's molded glass, odds are it is an older piece because they don't do that so much anymore because it's very labor intensive, and it sounds it's created just as it sounds. People are actually getting some pieces of glass and curving them, or they have like molds that they pour the liquid glass in and pluck out each of the little pieces and then construct a piece of jewelry. Cabochons. Cabochon is describes the shape of the stone itself. It's flat on the bottom, and then it like curves up and over. So it's like a half of a egg, I guess you'd say. Although it could be round, it could be oval. They're generally oval, but they can be round or whatever. So it's flat on the bottom, and then they don't have facets in them either. They're smooth. And cabochons could be glass. It could be resin. Resin is a fancy word for plastic. We like to say resin versus plastic, and it sounds a little better. Or even gemstones. So I've seen quartz and just about any type of semi-precious gemstones be in cabochon shape. Strong crystals. Crystals are glass, generally. Sometimes they could be quartz, but they're generally glass. And we say crystals when it is drilled through and it's like a bead and it's faceted. And then finally, enamel is another term that we use a lot, and I use a lot in describing. Enamel is some sort of, chemical way of they adhere color, and generally a lot of pieces, that's how they get their vivid tones is by, the painting, and it's called enamel. Let's see what else we got going here. So now we're on to hallmarks. So I think everybody should know what a hallmark is, but just in case, never say never. We have to explain everything here. So we have Trifari, Giorgio, JJ, Joan Rivers, Monet, Weiss, however you want to say it. Those are hallmarks. Those are where whoever made the piece of jewelry actually stamps his name, his or her name on the actual piece. Next. Well, here's some more identifying hallmarks, and this is where jewelry gets a little tricky. It would be a lovely thing if every single jewelry manufacturer stamped his name on the back, so we'd all know who made it, then we could have a clue and we could look it up and find out a little bit of the history about it. But sometimes they make it a little more difficult. In other words, these 3 lion heads, I know that's the Anne Klein logo lion. So whereas it's not marked anything on the backside, I know that piece was made by Anne Klein. The one in the middle, Da Vinci logo, you see like those little G's kind of structured together. I know if any piece of jewelry is marked with that, it's made by Da Vinci. And then the one on the far right-hand side is the 1928 pattern signature. If you look at the back of this particular piece, you'll see like scrolly marks on the metal, like a pattern. All of the 1928 pieces that didn't have tags were just signed by that. So if you see a piece like that, it's made by the company 1928. So that kind of completes our basic terminology here. So now we're going to dig into the actual 5 categories of jewelry. And my goal is to give you examples of all the 5 so that when, as I said, when you have a piece in front of you, you'll know where it is and what era it came from. So the first we're going to talk about is a Victorian jewelry. So that's from like the late 1800s to like 1920. And Victorian jewelry is kind of a mystery sometimes because it's generally not signed or marked anything. And you have to identify Victorian jewelry by its construction. And one of the surefire ways of determining a Victorian pin or brooch is by the C-clamp hook. So if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see where the pin is going there, and it's like a little C there where the pin latches into. That's a telltale sign that it's a Victorian piece, as well as on the right-hand side, the pin itself, it has like an extended pin back. So you could see it like, you know, like if somebody came up to you, man, you could like jab it or jab them, it's sticking out. But that's a, you know, a surefire piece. And as I said, we're talking here and we're looking at a piece of costume jewelry because it's set in brass. But with my Persimmon gem tester, I was able to test those stones going around, and I determined that those were actually garnets, and the turquoise was actually malachite, and it was pretty impressive. And I went, oh, I think this is worth something. So let's go to the next screen. I put it up there and I sold it for $200, and I think I probably picked it up for $5 somewhere at some place or some way because it was a cast off, because it was not gold or silver. So, you know, even though items are not in gold or silver, they are definitely, you know, worth the effort to list. And of course, I have to say, me having my Persimmon gem tester and knowing for a fact that those were actually garnets versus chunks of red check crystals made the whole difference.
But it was still a stab in the dark on the price, right? You were just like, well,
it was just, you know, where do you find something like this to
right,
compare?
yeah.
So, yeah, so exactly that's what I did.
Stab in the dark.
Stab in the dark. So let's look at some other types of pieces of Victorian. This is very, let's see here. I got some notes here next to me here. I'm moving on up. The one on the far corner over there, up on the top, a lot of Victorian jewelry, as I said, is set in brass. And the one on the top is set in a chain called a book chain. So I don't know if you can, you know, get a close-up look of the chain. It's like a link, and that's what they call it. And the pendant on it is actually pressed. So in other words, it's like if you would flip it over on the other side, you'd see the indentation on it. A lot more, Victorian jewelry was really big on morning jewelry. Morning jewelry, not like day and night morning. Morning jewelry, like I'm so sorry and sad that somebody died. So the remaining three pieces on this screen here, and you could see the values as to, you know, what they're selling for here, were meant and created for people that, you know, were mourning the loss of someone. Up on the top is a jet piece or whatever. And jet is actually, it could be one of two things. Jet is either like a fossilized wood that they would take and they would carve into pieces, and it was black and it was very, you know, coveted there. Or the French kind of mimicked the jet, and they did it like it's French jet glass. So sometimes when you have a piece like this, you have to determine, is it wood or is it glass? And, you know, sometimes that gets tricky, but and that comes with experience. On the lower left-hand side, you'll see one example of a piece of mourning jewelry that is made out of hair. Victorians were really big in snipping off lockets or chunks of their loved one's hair and giving it to somebody that would weave a piece of jewelry or create a bouquet or a braid and tuck it into a pendant or a locket. So lots of times, so if you were to ever come across any type of jewelry that is set in brass and has hair, odds are you're looking at a Victorian piece. And then finally on the lower corner over there, this is very typical, where you would get like a tintype of the person of a photograph. And this was probably a locket, I think it was, yeah, mourning brooch, pin, pendant, yeah. And so this is like a pendant and a locket where, you know, on the front you would have a picture of them. It would be set in brass, and then you'd have the, you know, the little stones going around it, and then the back was probably some sort of a clear glass frame where they would put a locket in of the person's hair, so that you could hold it close to you forever. Next screen. So now we're into Art Deco jewelry. So, you know, so that kind of takes us to the 1920s here. And I'm going to kind of like say Art Deco is like from 1920 to 1940. Some people say it's from like 1935, whatever. But so let's get into it and see see, what we're looking at here. Art Deco was a fun time. They went into more rhinestones, and new items were being created all the time. Lots of times when in the 1920s, they referred to a lot of the jewelry as paste and pot metal. Basically what that is, and most of the stones are generally glue-in stones on these things, it's very heavy. When you come up with a very heavy chunk of jewelry that, actually looks like unfinished metal, that's exactly what it is. They would design these things and they would not go the realm of plating it, because plating was still kind of new at this point. Rolled gold was in, and plating wasn't really dignified at this time. So they would just leave the base metal as it was, and it would look kind of dull and dark, and that's called paste metal. And then they would also intermingle plastic, like the early plastic. So this bouquet in the center here, and you could see it, it's, $25 or whatever for, some of these pieces, but they're very collectible, especially when you have flowers and you have bouquets and you have all of those little plastic little doodads in there. It's a pretty easy sell for $25 or $30. On the far right-hand side, this is when Bakelite came in. And Bakelite is actually one of the first plastics. And, there's different ways of testing as to whether or not it is truly a Bakelite or not. One of the easiest ways that I always use is with this nifty little stuff called simichrome paste or whatever. All you have to do, it's like a pink paste, and you get a Q-tip, and you get some of this paste and you rub it in on the back. And if the Q-tip turns brown, odds are you probably have a piece of Bakelite there. If there is no reaction and the pink paste stays pink, odds are you have celluloid or something else. But Bakelite, there's all different ways of testing Bakelite. Some people say that, they could rub it on their skin and they could smell it. And what they're really smelling is formaldehyde, because Bakelite has formaldehyde in it. So onward. These are some more examples of true Art Deco pieces. Art Deco is really known for a lot of the filigree. That's on the top right-hand corner. That's the real intricate work. And also with Art Deco, you're seeing a lot more white gold. The days of the roll gold and the pink and the gold are kind of faded out. New era, new look. So a lot of silver is there. On the lower corner down there, I have like the flapper check crystal beads. Though these come in like 60 inches, 70 inches. If you could, imagine the days of the flapper where they would put the long strands of beads on or whatever. Just this past New Year's, I would say I probably sold, 20, 30 of these types of necklaces, because everybody was having Roaring Twenties parties. And so I actually advertised these necklaces in my eBay store as flapper Roaring Twenties, and I got a lot of sales out of that this year. So you have to, what goes around comes around. And I would say in the last 5 or 6 years that I've had these things just sat in my store, but I took it, I took the opportunity to capitalize on it all.
I would have never have thought to do the necklace the way you did there in the lower right-hand corner. That's a cool idea. I like that.
Yeah, we do. I do that a lot for pearls and a lot for like cloisonne. I'm throwing out a few other terms or whatever. Things that people want to see the entire piece in one picture and not have part of the beads hidden by the neck form. I do want to mention on the left-hand side, this is a Miriam Haskell piece. And Miriam Haskell pieces, and you have to remember towards the end of the Art Deco period was when we were going into war, World War II. And so metal was at a premium. So a lot of these jewelry designers, their metal sources were stripped of them. So they had to get pretty creative. So this piece is all in wood and with some plastic beads. And even the backs were like, plastic. And so you could pick this particular piece up and say, oh, it's pretty cheap. It's just, metal and plastic or whatever. And it's not signed. It's not anything. But I could look at this and I could say, cha-ching, this is a good little sale and a good little piece. So again, you have to know the styles of the period and, and go with it and do the research. And I think, we'll just move on to the next one here. So now this is celluloid, another of the, the final two things that I wanted to point out, and these are really good sellers for me, both of them, is Art Deco celluloid. Now I know this looks like jet, and then I know this is what this particular piece is trying to mimic. It's a cheap version of jet, which is celluloid, which is really another word for very lightweight early plastic. And if you take a close look at the necklace, the actual chain that this is on, the necklace is actual plastic too, as well as the hook in the back where the necklace would hook on and stay on your neck. And 9 times out of 10, when you find these pieces, it's the hook that's broken. And this piece, cha-ching, I found one with it all perfect. And I think I sold it for like 65 or 70 bucks. And that was kind of nice. And I'm sure I pulled it out of a scrap bin for like $1 or $2. So that was nice. Another piece I wanted to point out that was very common and made in Art Deco times is camphor glass. One of the characteristics of camphor glass, and it sells really well too. Just about every time I have a piece of camphor glass, I usually put it up for like $100 or so, and it usually sells pretty rapidly. It has like rays going out, and it's frosted. And how they make it, it's like a piece of glass, and they put it in some sort of acid vapors, and it turns the glass frosted. But that's just the characteristic of it. And once you see a camphor glass, you will know what it is, and it's quite valuable. So now we're through Art Deco. So, and we got to kind of think, after, like in 5 more years or so, the war is over. So then after the war was over, people are starting to, get a little, they're happy. Everybody's back home, this and that. So mid-century jewelry is really, 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 and we'll flip to the next page here. It is the era of rhinestones, all different kinds of rhinestones. We got rhinestone necklaces and bracelets and pins and brooches and sets. And then this is when some of the manufacturers that are still actually going to, that are still popular to this day, like Eisenberg and Weiss, however you want to say it. These are when these companies really came into play, as well as the old timers like Monet and Trifari. They all, were starting back in the, slow start in the 30s and really started going in the 40s, continuing onward here. And let's go to the next slide here. These are some more examples, as well as we have all the rhinestones that were very prevalent, especially in the 50s and the 60s or whatever for the rhinestones. These were some of the other ones. And I always call the top set of, the top left-hand set is kind of like the Leave It to Beaver mom set or whatever, the multi-strand cluster strung necklace with the matching cluster clip earrings. And these are all clip earrings. We don't have very many piercers going on here now. And then the clamper bracelets. You see those. And they sell very well, especially if you have the sets. If you have just the necklace, not so much. Just the earrings, not so much. Just the bracelet, not so much. But if, you're fortunate enough and, you find all 3 of them, then you could get some decent money for it. Over to the top right, these are feather light. They're pretty much plasticky, but they're flowers and they have little rhinestones in them. These scream mid-century. Down on the bottom is thermoset. Thermoset is kind of a molded plastic. It has like a pearlized look to it. And generally each of these little sections are glued into place. And if you're lucky enough to find, like I had here, you know, a whole parure, and a parure is when you have the necklace, the pin, the earrings, and the bracelet, all four of the four pieces, it goes for a decent amount of money. And especially I want to say too, with thermoset, and I don't know why this is true, but if you have leaves and acorns, people seem to collect that more so than any, you know, than flowers or anything else random. And then finally on the screen, mid-century was also known for a lot of copper jewelry. So in the lower right-hand corner, I'm being challenged with right, left here, so I'm going here, so deal with me here. There was a lot of copper jewelry, and names like Renoir and Matisse came out, and if those are clearly marked. So if you find any Renoir, anything signed Renoir or Matisse, it's definitely from this mid-century time period.
Hey, on that bracelet, what it looks like it's floating. How'd you take that picture?
That picture is the piece is actually elevated on a clear acrylic riser. So it's setting on a clear acrylic riser that I buy.
And you're not doing any photoshopping or anything?
No, this is shoot it.
Because I'm looking at it on a second computer and I zoomed in and I cannot tell that there's anything there.
Yeah,
so
there is. It's a clear riser or whatever. I have them at all different sizes and shapes.
Good pictures, really good. That's crazy.
Yeah. So in this century, in this center here for, you know, mid-century jewelry, Juliana jewelry. And I wanted to take like a couple minutes here and talk about Juliana jewelry. This was the heyday of Juliana in the 50s and in the 60s, and you know, it kind of weaned out in the 70s or whatever. And Juliana is one of the misused terms on eBay. Everybody wants to throw their stuff up there and say it's Juliana. There are probably more pieces up there that aren't Juliana than are Juliana. So I wanted just to give a couple screens here, one on the bracelets, and then the next screen after this is going to be on a pin or brooch, on how you can really, for certain, know that if you have a Juliana bracelet or not. Juliana was famous for doing her bracelets in two different types of styles. One was the 5-panel style. So if you look especially in the middle picture on the lower bottom over here, you could count 5 panels there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ditto with the one on the far left. You could count 5 panels. If a piece, and I also want to say Juliana jewelry was never signed. Never. Earrings weren't signed, necklace wasn't signed, nothing was signed. So the only way that you can truly identify a piece as Juliana or D&E, and D&E stands for William DeLiza or DeLiza and Harold Elsler. That's where D&E comes from or whatever. You have to do it strictly by construction and quality. Juliana had amazing stones in their pieces. They used prong set stones 99% of the time. They wanted to make sure that their pieces were going to stay together for forever. And the metal work on the Juliana pieces, they were very heavily plated. So odds are they're not flaking, they're not tarnishing, they're really quite nice. The other style, we have the 5-panel bracelet here. And then the other unique thing that Juliana did with bracelets is if you look at on the lower picture there, it is like a square wire. It's not a tube. It's not like most, you know, jewelry is like rounded. These are like square finished or whatever. And that's another characteristic of a Juliana, as well as the clamper size. So like it opens and closes like on the top of your wrist rather than below. So it's not saying 100, you know, there's always exceptions to every rule. But if you find a panel bracelet like this and it's looking good and it has a lot of rhinestones in it, odds are it's a Juliana. And ditto if you find a very good looking clamper bracelet and it has the square metal, odds are it's a Juliana. So now let's go to the next screen, which will show what a Juliana is not and one is. On the left-hand side, this is a Juliana pin. And if you look at the top two, they're kind of similar. And I had a hard time finding like two of them that had scroll that really looked alike. But you could see, I mean, you know, both of them have nice looking stones. Both of them have prong set stones. Both of them have like scrollies around it. But now Juliana, it's really all in the construction. So you have to flip the piece over and you have to look to see exactly how, you know, how it was built. And on the left-hand side on the bottom, the one that is the Juliana, if you look at the pin bar, like where the latch is attached and where the, you know, where the base is, it's called a built-in joint and catch. That's what Juliana did with her pieces. But if you look at the other side, on the right-hand side, the one that I said is not a Juliana, and you see that bar going across, it almost makes it look like the pin, the entire pin construction was like soldered onto the piece after the base was done. That is not a Juliana. Juliana never did that. So if you have a piece that has that, you know, that piece that looks like it was soldered on, you could be certain that it wasn't a Juliana. If you have the other side, it might be a Juliana. It might be other ones too. But I guess I wanted just to point out, I see a lot of listings up there that say this is a Juliana brooch, and then they show the backside and they show this support bar. No, it's not. There's no way it is. And there's a lot of people out there that are very enthusiastic about Juliana jewelry, and I can call them like the Juliana Nazis. They'll come at you. No, they'll send you nasty messages on eBay if you're wrong. So let's continue on here. So now we're into the age of retro and more. So this would be, I would say, like from 1970 to 1999. And you find a lot of this out there in the wild. When I'm digging, and I would say this is probably, where I pull and I get most of my pieces, and most of my sales are coming. I'd say 2/3 of my sales are coming from this period to modern time. And, it's always kind of nice. So let's go to the next slide here. And I thought the best way of showing you this are some of the pieces that you really want to look for, and some of the names, and what you can get, the type of money you could get for them. The ideal, the one up on the top over here, this is a Trifari. And the Trifari pieces over here is unusual. And some of the rules that you really need to do when you are looking for some of these pieces are, you want to find pieces, number one, that are in perfect condition. You want to find pieces that are a little bit different. Like this particular one on the top, it has, like dragons going around it. So I knew that was like an unusual type of piece. Or you want figurals. You want like animals or figural, something, like on the top other thing, there's a leer. It's something different. It has to be unique. And you go for the classic designers when you're picking these items up to resell. And when I say classic designers, these are like the ones that I have visual here. On the top is the Trifari. And you can see I sold that necklace for $90. And I know I bought that last year at Jamie's flea market for $3 out of somebody's little stand. So that was quite nice. Below it, this is a Monet. Monet is really popular, especially with my foreign people that I sell to overseas, my foreign customers or whatever. Monets sell very rapidly, but the ones that are long and dangling and very impressive sell even quicker. So this one I sold for $40. And I know I was chatting with Jason before we even started. I said, it's funny how we could, find things from antique dealers or whatever. I bought this from an antique dealer for $3 because she thought it was nothing. And I flipped it like within a week for $40. So, they are out there, and you will find these quite frequently. I would say in a month's time, I'll pick up a half a dozen pieces like the Trifari and the Monet right there, which is kind of nice. I'm not hearing you, Jason.
Sorry, kind of like when I'm at a record store and they think they priced it right, and I know they have not priced it right.
Yeah,
So
is it that's when your eye and your customers and what's different and unique and your gut just tells you to buy it and you go for it. Ditto with the one on the other side. I want to point out that KL, that one is a Karl Lagerfeld, and I'm not even so sure I know how to say that properly or whatever, but I picked that up when I was in a Scott's show down in Columbus from a dealer. Again, she had it there for her junk pieces that I always go for. 3 pieces for $5. Cha-ching! I found that. I picked it up and it was like, yeah, that's a Karl Lagerfeld. I don't think it's a fake Karl Lagerfeld. I think it's a real one. And surely enough, it was a real one. And I sold it for $120. And Bergier is another name, a good name to look for too. They are like they're like a Vendome, or they're some of the classic names from the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s that are just kind of timeless, and people sell. And people will buy them, especially if they're in sets, like this particular one was. And those are clip earrings with the pin brooch or whatever. So let's flip to the next page. And up on the top left-hand side, this is kind of like what I consider like my bread and butter ones. I'm picking up these Trifari, just total, gold or silver tone pins, ditto with the Monet ones. I'm picking them up for $1, $2 and selling them for 15, 18, 20 bucks all day long. And I'll take it, $1 to 15 or 20 all the time. Here's the Anne Klein one that I was explaining to you, that this is her signature by the lion logo that I just knew, I sold it for like 20 bucks. I think that's what I sold it for, 20 bucks there. Down on the bottom, Joan Rivers. People kind of roll their eyes and chuckle at Joan Rivers. You could chuckle all you want, but I sell a lot of Joan Rivers. And her pieces are actually very well made. Especially the ones that have bees on it, like this particular one was. I believe I picked this up when I was down in St. Augustine, Florida, meandering around at a flea market or whatever, and I think I picked it up for like 10 bucks or 12 bucks, and it may have taken me, 10 months to sell it or flip it or whatever, but I got a decent amount of money for it. And then Kenneth J. Lane, KJL. Consistently, they buy that particular brand. And this one was a very unique one. I guess Angie Dickinson, teamed up with Kenneth J. Lane and, made a flag pin. And especially when you have the paperwork and the pouch to go along with the piece, that also increases your value. I don't know why, but it does. So now that takes us to our modern fashion jewelry. So this is where we're at right now. And obviously you could, I guess what I want to say is, if you sell clothes, if the clothes designer is hot now, then probably their jewelry is also hot. But these are some of the tried and true. And what I did here was I took a picture of either my listings or my sales, as well as the little hallmark that you will find inside. So at the top over there, that's a Graziano one. Graziano is a good name, and you could see the little tiny hallmark that is found somewhere inside that inner circle of that bracelet there, and it's really teeny tiny. That's why you need these in order to search it out. Next to it there is this Amadeo, and I'm not even going to try to say that last name over there, but I could tell these pieces is because there are pretty much like glass beads, but they're actual shell cameos. And this particular brand is very popular. It sells very rapidly for me, and it's clearly marked, which is very nice. On the lower left-hand side, my goodness, I have a snowplow going around outside, and I'm like, what the heck is going here? Anyway, on the lower bottom over there, that's a Joan Boyce. Joan Boyce sells very well. Hers is very pretty, but as you could look and see in the hallmark there, it says China very clearly, but if you look up above, there's a very stylized J and a B. That's her signature. So sometimes half the battle is figuring out who made it just by the hallmark. And then finally on this here, that's a pair of Givenchy earrings I pulled out for $1 out of a scrap bin not too long ago. And, you know, I sell those all day long for $20, $25. And again, they have the Givenchy logo on the back. Doesn't say Givenchy, although some of the newer Givenchy pieces say Givenchy, but I prefer to like the ones that have the fancy logos on them or whatever. All right, so the next screen here, I don't know, my Richfield snowplow people, and I apologize if you hear the snowplow going on outside.
Yeah, we don't even hear it, but that's funny. I'm like, what's that? A snowplow?
It is. It's a snowplow going on. That's really loud for me. On the top, Sheila Faye is very popular also too. Her pieces are not silver, they're not gold, they have genuine gemstones in it. Like this was some sort of I think it's quartz. It's white jade. It tested with my Prosimium gem tester or whatever. Her, the shanks are just electroplated, and they're a distinctive look of Sheila Faye is that her pieces are matte gold. When I say matte gold, that's not a shiny gold. It's like a dull gold. Going across, Brighton, it was more popular maybe 5 years ago. It was higher valued, but still today, if I get some decent Brighton pieces, I'll always pick them up. There's always a market for it, and they are signed by the little signature heart with a little scrolly bee on it. And then finally, down on the bottom, another piece that sells very, very well for me is Swarovski. And Swarovski sometimes signs it with the full name, but more times than not, it's just with a teeny little tiny stamp that has a little swan in it. So that's how you can determine, that it is. And finally, I just want to say that, jewelry is kind of like fashions. What's in today may not be in 3 to 5 months. So if you find that, this stuff is selling, put it up there now and get rid of it, because, in 6 months, nobody may want it. And then you're going to have to hold on to it for another 5 years, like I did with those Roaring 20 beads or whatever. But I found a home for them. So. And then, just really quickly, I'm just going to, ram out a couple things here. Top 10 random tips on jewelry. Generally, prong set stones are generally more desirable than glue-in ones. I think that's because they stay in and they're not tending to fall out. I don't know if you know this, but you could tell real pearls from fake, like glass or plastic pearls, by rubbing them on your teeth. If it feels like sandpaper, they are real. If it feels smooth, they are probably fake. Design pieces, since this should be a no-brainer, are easier to list and identify than unsigned ones. This is probably a big one for me. Buy perfect pieces. You won't get around to fixing misfits. I have a whole bucket, buckets of, just needs one stone. Yeah, right. It's going to sit there until I get rid of it one day. If you think you have amber, if you make very salty water and you put the piece in there, it'll float. And if you take a picture under black light, it will glow in the dark. It's a random tip for that one. A Chinese woman told me this one time when I had a strand of cloisonne beads that I was buying from her. And I'm like, they're kind of loose. She just looks at me. She goes, honey, he goes, what we always do, she says, is we get some very hot boiling water and we put it in there, and then we take it out and we let it dry and it shrinks. And I've actually done that, and it does work a little bit. So that's a tip. Sets are more desirable than single pieces to purchase and to sell, and you get a lot more money. The more pieces you have matching, the higher the price you could go for it. Verdigris, that's the green gunk that's on metal. If you have some of it and you dig out a Q-tip and some cider vinegar or some white vinegar and rub it, generally it takes away the green gunk. It neutralizes it and takes it away. When I'm doing my sales, I always find that whatever's hot today in the United States that my United States customers are buying, my international people are usually 2 to 3 years behind me. So in other words, my international people today are buying things that were really hot in the United States a couple years ago. And finally, just like everything, fakes are everywhere. And I'm not talking about, yes, there's Tiffany fakes or whatever, but there are fakes of costume jewelry like Juicy Couture, J. Crew, Betsy Johnson. So you just got to know you're real. And then when you see a fake, it's pretty obvious. And here I am. That's what I have.
Here I am.
I'm done.
That was awesome. The pictures are incredible. I am just Stacy's sitting here because we're about to do a haul, and we're both staring at that bracelet. Like, you just don't see it. It's so amazing.
Yeah.
A couple quick questions. Paul had one. Have you ever used toothpaste to clean silver-plated jewelry?
No, I've heard of that. I've always used the right silver cleaner. The one thing, just about anything, I would say, rubbing the jewelry with something is the way to go. Never, ever, ever, ever use that chemical dipping stuff. That's just my opinion. Although some people swear by it.
What refinery do you trust?
I usually don't. You know what refinery I trust? I have my contacts here for costume jewelry. They primarily deal in gold and silver. So that is my refinery. It's my suppliers that give me my costume.
Tons of fantastic info. My mom said, did you have jewelry knowledge before selling on eBay, or are you just self-taught?
Well, I would say I'm self-taught. My mom and I, when I was, way back in the 80s, when my kids were still little ones, my mom and I used to go to garage sales all the time and flea markets. And I don't know if you ever went to like them, the Memphis flea market or went out to Hartville, whatever. We went garage sailing. And once a year, my mom and I would set up and sell at craft shows just to make some Christmas spending money. And it kind of blossomed from there. And when my mom passed away, I literally had my old bedroom at my mom's house full of jewelry. And my one son got accepted into a very pricey college, Berklee College of Music out in Boston. And I had to figure out a way to come up with an extra $60,000 or $70,000 a year. So I went, oh, gee, I've got all this stuff. Maybe I should learn how to sell it. And yeah, I learned through the School of Hard Knocks in the last 9 or 10 years. I actually, can really remember one piece I sold for, I thought I was doing great. I picked it up for like $5 or $6. I sold it for like $170 until I found another dealer had it on her site for like $2,000. So, and it was a costume piece. It was a Trifari piece. So, I learned through the School of Hard Knocks, and reading. And I have to say that, Google these days is a wealth of knowledge. And especially, all of the different sites that have all the different hallmarks. I'm no expert by any means, even though I'll tell you, just in December, I sold 590 pieces in like 435 sales. So, I mean, a lot of pieces float through my fingers, but every single week I'm still finding out and learning new hallmarks and new jewelry marks that I got to go figure out who they are because I don't know. So there's so many.
You're like Encyclopedia Brown. I'll figure this out.
Yeah, it's just like, and I also have a rule, and I have to say this out there. There's so many people I read that say, oh, I spent all day researching this and that. I have the 5-minute rule. I take it. If my gut tells me that it's, that's Ziggy. Did you hear him? He squawked.
Yeah.
It's loud. I have the 5-minute rule. I don't spend all day researching anything. It's like, I'll look, I'll make and I'll put it on up there and move on because time is money.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Becky. That was amazing.
Thank you so much.
My mom told me you were awesome, and it was even more awesome than I could even imagine. I was so excited when I leafed through it when you sent it to me there. I'm like, ooh, that's exciting.
I'm so excited I figured out how to do a keynote presentation. So it's a win-win.
Becky skill this week.
All right.
So those of you who watch after the fact, Becky's in Secret Beach, feel free to ask a question. And everyone, I invite you to walk over virtually to the thrift haul that Stacey and I are going to do in about 32 seconds.
All right. Thank you much.
Thanks, everybody. And the Secret Beach, we'll see you over on YouTube for the thrift haul, and have a good evening.
Okay. Good night, everyone.
Bye.